I am so glad that we have Kim Hunt Uzelak here from Family Promise. She has quite a history with Family Promise. She has seen Family Promise through all sorts of iterations. And I'm sure we're going to hear about the way it's changed to meet the needs of our current world. Kim began working at Family Promise of Greater Rochester in 2010. Her initial job was to provide case management services to graduate families, which grew to include grant writing in 2012. She transitioned into full-time employment in 2013 and was named director of aftercare programs after securing funding to implement a rental subsidy program. So I read that to mean her grant application process was successful. Is that right? She was appointed network director in May 2014. Kim has a bachelor's degree from Hamilton College. She received a dual MSW, Master of Public Health from the University of Michigan in 1998. After she graduated, she moved to Rochester, where she worked 3 years at the Anthony Jordan Health Center's Teen Center as a counselor and health educator. She then moved onto the administrative side of nonprofits, spent many years writing grants and doing development work for a variety of organizations in the area. So you can tell why Family Promise hired her. Sounds like she just had all kinds of excellent background. And now we're going to hear more about Family Promise. And Kim, the clicker's not working, so just tell me when you want me to change the slide and I will.
Okay, no problem. We can adapt to everything, can't we? Yes, in this world we have to. Well, thank you so much for that introduction. It's funny to hear. I feel so, Becky, you just were like, you can't be that old, but hearing I graduated in 1998. Yeah. It's a long time ago. We don't all have to share that. Well, thank you. Yes, I've been at Family Promise. Most of you knew it as RAIN, probably, right? Sometimes RAIN probably slips out of your mouth, but yep, Family Promise. I've been there for 14 years. So, and as was just expressed, I've seen it through many iterations. So I want to share with you today. Is that fan? That's this, right? I'm like, am I hearing something? That's fine. It doesn't bother me, just as long as I know what it is. So I want to share with you today where we're at currently with the programming, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the housing crisis that we're facing in this nation, and an understanding of how we got to the point we're at, and maybe some local action steps that we all can take to address it. The systems are hard to repair, but we can each do small things to help. So let's go on to the next slide. So we start every meeting at Family Promise, whether it's a committee meeting or a staff meeting or a board meeting or a meeting like this, with a reading of our mission and vision to remind us why we gather and do the work that we do each day. So the mission of Family Promise, and these have changed. So we did some work with Causewave. So for those of you that knew RAIN and knew our mission, these have changed in the last few years. Family Promise of Greater Rochester will assist families at risk of or experiencing homelessness to achieve sustainable independence by providing person-centered, holistic services in collaboration with the greater community. And our vision. Family Promise of Greater Rochester will have achieved success when affordable, decent, equitable housing is seen as a human right and every family has a place to call home. Okay. So most of you know our history, right? So I'll go through this slide fairly quickly. RAIN opened their doors on April 26, 2004. So next year will be our 20th anniversary. I know you're all, Becky just told me, going to be celebrating 50 years. Congratulations. So 20 years for Family Promise. Most of you know, may know, Nancy Frank and Roderick Froman, Pastor Roderick Froman, founded the organization. We're part of a national organization called Family Promise, based in New Jersey, which was founded by a woman named Karen Olson in the 80s as a response to an increase in family homelessness in our country. And Karen had the idea of utilizing congregational space for shelter. She thought, why not use congregational space? It's sitting empty during the week, so why not house families who are experiencing homelessness in that space, and utilize volunteers as a cost-saving response to family homelessness. So that's what they did. And they opened the first affiliate in the 80s in New Jersey, and then affiliates sprung up all over the nation, with RAIN opening in Rochester in 2004. And there are currently about 200 affiliates across the United States, one in Alaska, one in Hawaii. And they provide programming guidance for us. They are actually incredibly helpful throughout the COVID pandemic. I don't know what I would have done without the national office providing guidance on health guidance and working remotely. And they continue to provide that guidance to us in terms of moving away from the rotational model in congregations. Most affiliates now have moved away from that model, much like we have. So they are extremely helpful in providing guidance and in programming and operations. So most of you know that, like I said, we were based in the model of utilizing volunteers. At one point in our history, we had over 1,800 trained volunteers. Most of you probably went through that training. And that is no longer the case. We down to, I don't know, maybe 100, 120 volunteers throughout the year that we see quite regularly, whether it's office assistants or delivering furniture or working with us on second Saturdays, which I'll talk about a little further on in the presentation. But COVID really impacted so much of our lives, including nonprofit organizations and corporations. And the way it impacted us most significantly was through the impact on our volunteer corps, which we are slowly trying to build back up. I just included a quote down here about Karen Olson. I'd just like to pay tribute to her since she was the founder. A simple act of compassion set in motion a national movement to end family homelessness. Of course, that's still in motion because we haven't ended family homelessness. We can go ahead. So this is staff at Family Promise. We're now a staff of 7, well, 6, because Beth's last day was Friday, our director of development, but we will be posting that position and rehiring. So this is Aisha, myself, Jenny, Letitia, that's Beth. This is Leonette. And then in the picture over here, that's Lorraine. Lorraine has since retired. An intern from Nazareth, Beth again, Sonia, and Aisha. So there are 7 of us, and we are a pretty close-knit family. Thank you. Go ahead. So have most of you been to our offices at 142 Webster Ave? I know Becky and Jim, you both have. So a lot of you were I know you have too. Yeah. Have most of you been to the 34 Meg Street offices? Okay. So, in 2017, we relocated our operation from Meg Street. We were using a home that was owned by Third Presbyterian, and we moved over to 142 Webster Avenue for more space so that we could grow. We were expanding at that point. We had added our prevention and diversion program. So we've been in this space since 2017 in the Beechwood neighborhood, and they have welcomed us, and it's truly been a wonderful move for us. And I'll get into why that is a little bit further along. Can go ahead. So we have 4 core programs. Most of you know about the shelter program. Those were our roots in the shelter program, where we sheltered families in congregational space. So we're still doing that. We have since moved from sheltering families in congregational space. When COVID hit, we stopped that program temporarily. We returned to that program by sheltering families in a hotel, Comfort Inn in Greece. We quickly realized that that was not financially feasible. It was costing us a lot of money as an organization to pay for hotel rooms every night. And it also wasn't trauma informed. If you can think of a family of 5 in a hotel room, it's not what anybody wants to do. We all know DHS is still using hotels for shelter placement. We've gotten to a point in our community where we have to use hotels for shelter. But at Family Promise, we decided that that's not the direction we wanted to head in. So we rent shelter apartments in the community. And I have a few pictures of those later on. The Prevention and Diversion Program is a program that was added in 2019. This is currently our largest program. It provides security deposits for families who have lost housing, but have not yet moved into new housing, and they have not entered the shelter system. So it's kind of a tricky niche that we're serving. Our funding is for diversion, and that's what diversion means. So they can't go from house to house. They have to have already lost their housing, but they haven't entered the shelter system yet. So the diversion part is diverting them from shelter. And then the prevention is rental arrears funding to pay for back rent so that the family's not evicted, which ultimately is a goal that we want to keep families out of the housing crisis of homelessness. So being able to pay that back rent is key to preserving that family in stable housing. And then the aftercare and stabilization program is what I was hired for. So that provides a year of, I've since moved on from that position, but that was my initial position at Family Promise. So that's providing case management support for 1 year after transitioning out of the shelter program and the prevention and diversion program. So that really is what sets us apart from a lot of other organizations, and that we do follow families for a year after transitioning from a moment of crisis into stability. These families are still living in poverty, right? So to have that ability to walk alongside them for a year and to catch them in case they fall again is key to really our statistics in keeping family housed for a period of time. We don't want a revolving door of families coming in and out of shelter. So for that year, we're able to advocate to landlords. We're able to help get kids into school if they need to, whatever comes up for the family, really, whatever their needs are. And then we've most recently, I don't know if you've seen this in some of our e-newsletters, we've recently started a transitional housing program. This was in response to the purchase of our building at 142 Webster Avenue. We purchased the building in March of this year. We were using the apartments on the second floor. So there's the first floor of that building is a day center, it's offices. And then the second floor is for apartments. So in buying that building, we got access to those apartments. However, we knew that we would have to go through a special permit process to use those apartments as shelter. And that was going to mandate 24-hour coverage. And we don't have the staffing to do that. So I went to the board and I proposed a transitional housing program. So that's what we're using those apartments for. And the family sign a year lease. They pay rent. So it's entering into a lease agreement with Family Promise. So that lease can renew for 1 year after the initial year for a total of 2 years. And it's for families who have exhibited stability, and families that we feel can move towards even greater self-sufficiency and sustainability, whether that's getting on a permanent supportive housing list so that they only pay 30% of their income in rent, or home ownership. We actually just moved a family into one of our transitional housing programs that would like to move towards home ownership. So we're working with her to repair her credit, get her hooked up with a bank. So ultimately, that's a wonderful goal because that says financial inequities that are in our, certainly in our country. So the 2-year program, they come in, like I said, they sign a lease. The rent for the apartments is below market value. So a 2-bedroom apartment is $650. A 1-bedroom apartment is $550. 3-bedroom, $750. 40% of their rent that they pay goes into an escrow account that we keep for the family. And when they move at the end of the 2 years, they get that money back to be used in whatever way they want to ensure sustainability. And then the 60% we keep for maintenance costs and that kind of thing. So we can go ahead. Just a quick dive into our prevention and diversion program. I did say that this is the our most, I don't know, successful sounds a weird way to describe it. We don't want anything to truly be successful when we're talking about homelessness, but this is our most well-funded program, and we can see the difference it's making in the community. So in 2022, we were able to assist 104 families. We distributed almost $100,000 in the community for an average rent payment of $930 per household, which is all that is taking to keep a family out of homelessness. So if you think about that, just let that settle in for a minute, is that most of the families that come to us for rental arrears, $930 is the average amount to keep a family. So think of a mom and dad, kids, grandma, kids, out of homelessness and entering the shelter system. So if we can do that, ultimately, that's a better deal for a family than entering the shelter system. We get about 200 requests per week for this program. The way we do it now, when we headed out of COVID, the response to COVID in terms of rental arrears was unlike anything I've ever seen. Family Promise was part of the national rollout of ERAP federal funds to when the eviction moratorium was in place. The federal government distributed funding to communities to prevent evictions. So during that time, we gave out 1.7 million. That's separate from this funding, just our organization alone. So we thought, as an organization, maybe when the eviction moratorium lifts and we kind of get back to normal, that we might see the numbers decrease a bit in terms of need, because so many families were able to recover their housing through that federal funding. That wasn't the case at all. We're continuing to see a very high need for rental assistance, so much so that we had to move to an online portal for a request because we couldn't handle the influx of calls. We would be on the phone and 20 other calls would come in while we were on a call, a 20-minute call with a family. So it was like every minute a call was coming in. So we've moved to an online portal request. It's like a Google form, and we open it on the 1st of every month for prevention and diversion, and we close it when we get 200 requests. In October, we opened it on the 1st of the month, and we closed it 36 hours later. And we received 215 requests. We can assist 13 on average households. So that's probably like 5 to 6% of the requests that come in, we can assist. So that gives you an idea of the need out there. I know this starts to get pretty depressing, so we'll talk about some more positive things towards the end. Most of our referrals for this program come through 211 Lifeline or just direct. Everybody in the community knows that we're doing this, and those that are in need of rental assistance tell their families, they tell their friends. There are only a few organizations doing programming such as this. It's ourselves, Catholic Charities, DSS has some rental arrears funding, but by and large, there's not a lot of funding for this. So people know that we open up this portal, and that's why we get that response every month. Okay, we can go ahead. So this is an example of our apartments. You can see the pictures that we have. So now we're using apartments for shelter. We have 3 apartments on Portland Avenue and 3 on Ketchum Street, 1 studio, 3 1-bedroom and 2 2-bedroom. This is separate from our transitional housing program. A lot of people get confused. This is our shelter program. So families don't pay any money for this. They don't sign a lease. They come in, they're homeless. They come in, they do an intake with our team. They move into one of these apartments. They're in these apartments for on average 2 to 3 months, and they move into permanent housing. So this is an example of an apartment at Ketchum. So they're nice apartments. It's been, I was starting to explain to Jim and Becky, this is a new thing for us is we rent these from a landlord, but we're still somewhat responsible for the maintenance of the apartments. And it's interesting being kind of a pseudo landlord to the landlord. It's kind of a new world for us. We just had a family of 6 living in one of the 2-bedroom apartments. And during their time there, they broke 2 windows. So you just never know what's going to come up. You know, the kids were rambunctious. So this is a new learning process for us, is kind of, you know, being in charge of remote families, being remote in these apartments. Leonette and Letitia, who run the shelter program, are there every other day. They have contact with families in the shelter every day via text and phone calls. So there's still that really close relationship. I would say it's not as structured as it used to be in the rotational model. In terms of, we don't always know what's happening in the apartments. But I would say overall, it's been a good experience, and it's certainly, I think, more trauma informed and family centered for those going through the program, in that they have their own space. They don't have to move from congregation to congregation each week. So for us, that's been a really big positive. Okay, we can go on. You know, I'm thinking, like, if there are questions, would you guys rather just do questions at the end, or do we want to do questions while I'm talking? Because I'm okay with either. Sometimes if we wait to the end, you might forget what you want to ask. So I'm okay if you have a question. I don't know how you usually do it. Okay. So this is, I've already talked about this, the transition from congregational space. Some outcomes for shelter for 2022. We provided shelter for 30 families, 107 individuals, including about 66 children. 70% of those families transitioned into permanent housing. The average length of stay was 60 days, which is a bit longer than 4 years ago. It's just harder. It becomes more and more challenging it seems like every week to find affordable, decent housing. So that's getting stretched out a bit. I think it's comparable to that for 2023. Okay, moving on to our transitional housing program. So not to be confused with the shelter program, this is also utilizing apartment space, but these are apartments that we own. These are the apartments on the 2nd floor of Webster Avenue that we now own because of the purchase in March of the building. And we have been renovating these apartments. This one has been fully renovated, and there's now a family in this apartment. Have any of you been to the apartments upstairs? Okay. So we have above the lobby space, there's a 3-bedroom apartment. And then on the other side of the building on the 2nd floor, there are 2 1-bedroom apartments and another 3-bedroom. So this is a 3-bedroom apartment. When we purchased the building, the board released $20,000 to be used for renovations. We haven't used all of that. We've used about 12,000 of it, but in this apartment, we put in new flooring throughout the entire apartment. We repainted everything. We put a new cabinetry in the kitchen, and most of the installation and the work in this apartment was volunteer driven. So that certainly gave us the opportunity to re-engage with some of the volunteer force. And it was wonderful. We have so many pictures of volunteers ripping up carpet and painting. So this is an example of one of the transitional housing apartments. We will be making an announcement about a partnership with another local organization in the next few months. What we're saying right now is that we are entering a partnership with a local organization. We can't say their name yet. To extend this program, we will, once that partnership is formalized and reviewed by our lawyers, we will have access to 2 more buildings, which we will own. And we will have added to our transitional housing program 8 additional apartments, which is pretty great in terms of housing in Rochester. Yeah. It's a really exciting partnership. We secured the buildings for $1 each. Yeah. And we'll continue that partnership with that organization. It's when you hear about it, you'll be excited. Okay, we can move on. So I wanted to show you all a pretty short video about the work that's been done in our apartments, both the transitional apartments and the housing, the shelter apartments, just to give you an idea of the space and how we're currently utilizing volunteers. So if you shut this down.
The best way to go is down these stairs, out the door to the right. We're a Brady Bunch. You know, this, so that you don't trip. Best way to go is down these stairs, out the door to the right. We're a Brady Bunch. You know, so that you don't trip. Like it just. The first place. Oh, yeah. It's really important that they have their own space and dignity and someone they thinks it feels and hang out with their kids. And so we partner with the local landlord and rent spaces like this one, where there's kids' bedroom and we provide towels and linens and toiletries and food if they need it, where they can kind of settle, right? Because it's really traumatic not to have your own space and your own things. Where we just were is the day center. So on the first floor, we have all sorts of in-kind donations, and that's where staff work and families can meet with staff there. Upstairs, we have apartments now, and those are transitioning into a new program. We'll have a small number of apartments where families will actually be able to sign a lease and be a part of the program longer.
There we go. Yep, this is good. This is a good starting spot. Thank you. We did it. I think we did it. Yep, that's it. Yep. Yep, this is the page I want to be on. Yes. Thank you. Yes. It's all different. So we, our budget's about 650,000 a year. Most of that comes from individual donors. So we have a pretty strong donor base of folks that have been supporting us for a long time, some of them 20 years. And then we have a few events every year. So we have our bowling event in March. We had our gala, which we had to cancel because of low ticket numbers, but that was something that we're going to roll over for next year for our 20th anniversary. I write a lot of grants, so we get about $120,000 worth of just local foundation grants. I also submit a emergency solutions grant every year to the city. That comes from the federal government and it's channeled through to the city. That's about 50,000 a year. And then congregational support. We still actually get a lot of congregational support. We were worried about that with moving the families out of congregational space, but we still have that as a line item. So we get about $50,000 a year in congregational support, which is wonderful. So it's pretty diverse. We don't rely on one main thing, I think, which is why we've been able to remain financially healthy. We haven't run a deficit since 2014. We just started an endowment account actually 2 years ago for to support the prevention and diversion program. Yeah, thank you. So I don't know, how much time do we have left? Okay, and does that include questions? Okay. So I won't go into a lot of the rest of the slides. I think the most important thing I wanted to share with you all is where we are now in terms of programming. The rest of the rest of the presentation is largely about how our organization fits into the community and the systems at large. So if we want to go through these pretty quickly, I can just touch on the I think the most important part of this is the concept of home. So when I'm talking to groups that have no concept of poverty or homeless in Rochester, which I don't think is you all, like, you know, let's say it's a Rotary Club, or that maybe a few of them have an idea of what it is to live in poverty, but by and large, most of them don't have that firsthand experience. So I do like to bring it down to something very simple, which is home, the concept of home. So what words and images come to mind when you think of home? And you can just, let's share out really quickly and we can kind of summarize what home means to us. So what does home mean to you? Yep. So sanctuary, safety, security. And everyone should have that. Do you believe that? And most of us probably have that, right? We'll return to our home, whatever that is today, and we will feel a sense of safety. Hopefully, most of us will feel that, a sanctuary. Yeah, it's so important in terms of living your life, like moving forward in a way that is healthy, that is sustainable for your children, to have that foundation of home. So I ask audience to keep that in mind during the talk, so we can move on. So I think well, if we have only 15 minutes left, let's just spend time on this slide and a few others. So if we revisit our vision statement, which is affordable, decent, equitable housing, and we think about that concept of home, let's just take affordable housing that should cost, what did our parents, grandparents teach us? A third, right? That's what my dad taught me. Kimberly, never spend more than 33% of your income on rent. And it stuck with me. Most of our families spend at least 50%, if not more. A lot of them are spending 80 to 90% of their income on housing. And I think even in middle class America, that is increasing, right? It's getting just more expensive to access housing, decent housing without violations, housing that makes you feel, back to our concept of home, that makes you feel secure, that gives you a sanctuary. Some of our families are living in homes with holes in the walls. A family called us last year and said, I have a hole in the wall and I can see outside. And I shouldn't have a window in that space. They kind of made light of it in a joke, but I'll never forget it because of that. A lot of our families regularly have rodents crawling around, like that's a regular occurrence. That also is getting worse. And it's a difficult issue because we know that a lot of landlords in this community and others lost a lot of money during COVID. Despite that federal funding that came through our community, a lot of landlords were hurt financially, so they can't afford to fix up their home. So it's kind of like this vicious cycle of not having the money to fix up a home, but then a family is living in a home that is, it's not even really a home. I wouldn't call it a home. They're living in a place that's not meant for, it's inhabitable. And then equitable housing, housing that's available to all regardless of gender, sex, race, ethnicity, ability, and religion. And we see a lot of discrimination in our housing in Rochester, and I think nationally. A lot of families will tell us that landlords won't rent to them because they have DHS, which is welfare, TANF, or they have a Section 8 voucher. That's illegal. A landlord can't not rent to you because you have a DHS subsidy or Section 8. So we run into that equitable housing. Yeah, you can go ahead. So just to dwell on this a little more, the average rent of a 1-bedroom apartment in Rochester is $975, and the TANF, so a DHS grant for a family of 3, is $786. See how the math, it doesn't add up. I think what I want to go to for our final slide is there's a budget. Yeah, right here. So this is an actual family that we had in shelter last year. So minimum wage, $14.20. The mom was working 35 hours a week. So that's net $1,600 per month. And this is her budget. So her rent, $848, which is reasonable now. Utilities, car payment, you can see her balance at the end of the month was $7. And what's missing from that? Right. Food. She's got kids. Right. Yep. Incidentals, like kids coming home from school and saying, my class is taking a field trip. I need $10. Right. And mom has to say, well, you can't go because I don't have $10. So we don't have time today, but I just want to leave you with, this is the reality. We don't have time to go through the rest of the slides and talk about the systems that are at work. Most of you probably already know about the systems that are at work, the redlining, the racial covenants that are in a lot of our neighborhoods that were set in place a long, long time ago that are still being felt today. So those systems that were intentionally built, 590 was built to separate neighborhoods. I cross that line every day coming from Penfield into the city to go to work. There's intentional structures and inequities that were built into our communities in the United States that are still alive today. There's a reason why we have these housing inequities. If you look at the deinstitutionalization of mental health back in the 70s and 80s, the stoppage of public housing being built back, I don't know, was it the Reagan era, maybe the 80s? That have landed us in a position where we've always had this, right? But now we have so much of this. We have so many families living every month with $7 or less without food and clothing. So this is the reality in our city. So in terms of what Family Promise is doing about it, the transitional housing. So let's leave on a positive note before we get into questions. The transitional housing is one response that we have to the need for increased housing in our communities. Advocacy, sometimes in the Friday updates. I don't know if you all receive those. I think you do. I'll put out opportunities for engagement and advocacy. Pay attention to those. I know this congregation does a good job of responding to calls for action. Keep up the good work because all of us are needed in addressing the housing crisis in this community. So pay attention even when it's hard. Open your hearts and minds, and let's all take those small steps to address this. So let's open it up to questions.
I have one.
Okay,
So you said you get 200 requests and would get many more per month
Yeah.
for subsidy. How do you decide between those 200, which 8% will get your support?
good question. It's hard. So the first thing we do, so our prevention team is 3 individuals. Once all the requests come in and the portal is shut down, they go through that list on the next day, the next business day, and they eliminate all of the families that owe over $1,200 or are asking for more than that's our max. That's not something that we share with the community, so don't share that number. We tell folks it's about a month rent. So anything over, if someone's asking for over $1,200, they're eliminated. If they don't have children, they're eliminated. If they can't sustain rent going forward, they're eliminated from the request. So we actually mark them in red. So it comes through on a Google form. So in its Excel spreadsheet, we mark them with red, and they get an email almost immediately saying you don't qualify for our program because of this, this, and this, and here are some other resources that you can access. If the rent owed is more than a couple months, the only resource they have is really DSS, because DSS is able to pay back rent over 1 month. So the next step after that, after we've eliminated all those that are not eligible, that eliminates out of the 200, it probably eliminates maybe 50 households. The rest of them, we just go through and we see which ones are highest need. So if a mom is saying, I've lost my housing, I'm sleeping in my car, but I haven't entered the shelter system yet, we might provide them with, they would go to the top of the list for a security deposit. Like, let's say mom says, I found a house, I've been sleeping in my car for a week. And this is the reality. We have so many families sleeping in cars out there. It's unbelievable. They would go to the top of the list for a security deposit so we can get that family quickly into housing. In terms of rental arrears, again, it's the same. We just look at the list and we decide who's the biggest need if we can. It's just a really difficult. So really what sometimes it comes down to is if a family calls. I hate to say this because it's so hard to make it equitable. If a family calls and they're on the list and we talk to them, you can't help but open your heart to the family, right? And so they might get rental arrears payment. Also, if it's a name that's been on the list maybe 5 times, because that's what we see repeat requests. So if they've requested 5 times, we might say, okay, we're able to help you this month. That sustainability piece is huge. So if we talk to a family and we find out they can't sustain rent going forward, we don't want to pay back rent if they're going to lose their housing anyway. So in that case, we might say, would it be better for you to just move? You're going to have a judgment against you because you owe back rent, but would it be better for you to just move and pay less rent if you can find it? It's a really hard decision. It's pretty agonizing. Yeah. Thank you.
Moving from transitional into the market housing,
Yeah.
what kind of difficulties do you have in finding that housing?
Well, we just started the transitional housing program a couple months ago, so we haven't experienced that yet. We're at with the one family that moved into the apartment that you saw renovated. They've been in that apartment for a month now. And the first thing Leonette did with the family was look at their credit. So the first thing we will do is work on credit repair. And then we're going to hook her up with someone who works on first-time homeownership that we have a close relationship with. So I don't know. I don't know what we will find. It may not be doable. We might find that it's not a reality for this family, but we're going to do our darndest. If that's her dream, she does have a full-time job. She makes $22 an hour. She does have some credit repair to do. We're going to get her on the Habitat list. We're going to get her on the Buy the Block, the new city initiative for housing. For those of you that know the mayor's housing task force, part of that is by the block where they, it's new housing that they build. It's pretty competitive. So we'll go from a lot of angles to help her get into housing. It's a long road. Yeah. But we've been talking a lot about the concept of the American dream. The American dream for most of us is homeownership, right? But for our families, that may not be their definition of the American dream. It may just be stable housing. And what does that mean for them? And we want to set them up for success. So if homeownership is not going to be successful for them, if they don't have because it's hard to own a home, right? There are a lot of pitfalls, especially these days. So our main goal is to set a family up for long-term success, whatever that is for them. And for this family, she does want to own a home. She's been working full-time for many, many years. We think that she maybe can do it. So we're just going to try our darndest. If any of you have any ideas, let us know. We're open to all suggestions. Yeah.
I was curious about the spectrum of volunteer opportunities.
Mhm.
What sorts of things do you need people for?
Yep, thank you. Answering phones. We have 3 volunteers that are coming in to answer phones on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday from 1 to 4. So we're looking for 2 other volunteers to do that. That is not an easy task, to listen to stories, but you get to listen to the story and pass it off to one of the case managers or social workers. So we are looking for 2 other, at least 2 to 3 other volunteers to help with that. We are looking for folks to help with our clean team. So every time a family moves out of shelter into permanent housing, we have to turn over those apartments. So we have a team that goes in and cleans the apartments. It's not easy. It's not fun unless you like to clean. I love to clean. So that's definitely a big need. Now we have a team of probably 10 to 12 folks that do that, and they alternate. Like we just do a call out when a family's moved out. We have an apartment ready to clean. Who can come on Monday at 11. Second Saturdays is a big volunteer opportunity. So every second Saturday of every month from 1 to 4, we open up the day center and we invite volunteers into the space and we have a list of projects. So that's how we were able to get a lot of that done. You saw some of the groups painting. We just had a second Saturday last weekend. We had about 25 individuals there. And our day center is spotless. The bathrooms are cleaned. We got 1 closet completely organized, which is amazing. One group went over to Ketchum to clean our apartments on Ketchum to clean the yard because it was starting to get a little trashy. So that's a wonderful opportunity. We are hoping to start, once we have the transitional housing program up and running, we're hoping to start like a monthly meal gathering at the day center, where we invite transitional housing families down, or the other building that we're actually about to purchase for $1 is across the street, which is wonderful. So we would invite those families. So we're hoping to start, we're gradually getting back to thinking about ideas to engage volunteers. Yeah, thank you.
Last question.
This is a little bit out of your bailiwick, but you talked about people who are living in their cars.
Mhm.
I've been aware that this has been going on for a long time, but you suggested that it's even gotten worse lately.
Mhm.
Has there ever been any effort, to your knowledge, to provide specific services to people who are actually residing in their cars? I know on the West Coast,
Yeah.
it is such an extensive problem so that they actually have designated parking areas. They have obviously toilet facilities and so forth. And is there anything like that in Rochester, to your knowledge?
Not that there's nothing like it available right now. Last year, about 8 months ago, I started to talk with Nick Coulter at PCHO. I don't know if you know Nick, about that very thing. Like what can we do about folks, because it's, you know, individuals and families, because that's they'll lose their housing before they lose their cars, right? They keep hold of their cars because it's how they get to work. Yeah, I don't know if Nick, that committee kind of fell off. I don't know if Nick's still doing work on that, but yeah, I think it's gonna become, if things keep going the way they're going, I think we're gonna need that, which is really sad. Yep,
Children's safety at night.
yep. You can park in Walmart parking lots overnight.
Is that right?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, I know, I think it's, you know, we've started talking about, and I know on the West Coast, you're certainly right, it's a reality out there that they have tent encampments and they have, you know, we have our Peace Village here where we're providing shelter and toiletries, and the fact that in this country, we are thinking about parking lots with securities and toilet facilities to keep families safe. It's like, what are we doing? You know? So, yeah.
One quick question. I looked into volunteering after the in-church thing shut down, and it seemed like I was going to have to do like 10 or 15 hours of online training to be able to go in and clean. Am I wrong?
It's yes, yeah, yes. 10 to 15 hours. No. So we were asking folks who were in proximity to families to especially take the trauma-informed training. For cleaning, I think it's for your knowledge, but I've been through the trainings. They take about 45 minutes. So there are 3 of them. They take about 45 minutes each. Would we say if you wanted to be a part of the clean team, would I personally say you have to complete these trainings to do that? No. If you wanted to do maybe the trauma-informed one, which is the 3rd one, but yeah, it's not 15 hours. They're like 30 minutes to 45 minutes. Yeah.
That sounds very doable.
But I don't want it to be prohibitive. We don't want it to be, you know, something that's stopping someone from, we felt as an organization like we had to have some sort of accountability for volunteers because it's not as structured as it used to be. You know, we used to do the trainings at the congregations. So we offered that almost as a opportunity to learn more about what we're doing, but we don't want it to be an obstacle to volunteering. So
we all
Yeah.
can volunteer.
yes, yes, absolutely.
Oh, Kim, thank you. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, so we've gotten a lot of information through Mary and through Becky over the
Yeah.
years. They
so.
do a wonderful job at
They do.
keeping us informed and through
Mhm.
emails, but it's really great also to hear it straight from you. And thank you so much for
Yeah,
coming.
Anytime.
And